Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda. I am here with my weekly wrap-up. And do you hear that? It is not silence, but it's a lot closer to silence than it has been. You still hear construction across the street. My kids are back in school. My husband this week started going back to the office for 4 days, 4 out of 5 days this week, since COVID. But Fridays are the day he's home. So my husband is home. However, my son did do the dishes. So hopefully we won't have a repeat of the whole dishes temper tantrum we had in one of my videos this week. But yes, it is much quieter now. It is the most wonderful time of the year. This is probably the last day I'll be wearing a tank top because it's hot and muggy here, and Oregonians don't do muggy. We don't. We need a thunderstorm to cool it down, but it does look like it's going to cool down kind of after today. So this is my last day for the tank top, but that's okay. So yeah, it's been a busy week with the back to school thing. So my son started back on Wednesday because he's a freshman, and Wednesday's freshman orientation. And then Wednesday night we had back to school night, which is the first time that I've been, our family's been at this high school that they did it that night. Usually it's later, but I got to meet all but one of the kids' teachers. I didn't get to meet my son's Spanish teacher because she wasn't there. That's why I didn't get to meet her. But my daughter has had her before and really liked her. I'm really impressed with the teachers that my kids have this year. My daughter in the past 2 years, most of her teachers have been great. There've been a couple where I'm like, But no, I'm really impressed with all of them. My husband wasn't able to go because he had an appointment that night, which was probably good because if he had gone, we would still be talking to one of the science teachers because my husband was just... But meanwhile, I, am always interested in what the history and the English teachers are teaching. So my son's English teacher is the same one my daughter had freshman year. And I haven't seen his syllabus for this year, but when my daughter had his class, they did do The Absolute True Story of a Part-Time Indian. Great book, problematic author. So that's good. I actually have a lot of confidence in this particular teacher. And then my daughter's English teacher, she's in the IB program. So this is like hardcore. We're now hardcore prepping you for college kind of thing. And this year, one of the books the book that they're definitely going to read is 1984, which I've never read. I was going to read 1984, and then I read Wifedom for the BookTube Prize a couple years ago, which totally turned me off Orwell. But now I think I have to go back and read 1984. And I made a joke. I was like, oh yeah, that is not at all topical. And the teacher laughed and she said, well, it was between that and The Handmaid's Tale, but the junior boys don't like The Handmaid's Tale. So it was 1984. But next year, if she keeps the same choices, they'll be reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is an Oregon classic, and The Nickel Boys. And I'm so glad to see The Nickel Boys on a high school IB curriculum. So that's cool. And then, for history, they've changed the curriculum. So this year, my son has U.S. history. And I liked the teacher because part of all of his assignments, he has to show his parents and talk to his parents about it. Then we have to sign. My son has already told me he will talk to me and not my husband. That's a good plan. That's a very good plan. But yes, she seems really on the ball. And then for my daughter in the IB program, they do History of the Americas. So they start with the Mexican War. And I was kind of looking at the topics they do. It was really interesting to see kind of how they go. This is, I believe, a 2-year class that she has. So she was also hoping to take a class called People in Politics, but it's weird. It's an IB class, but it's not required if you do full IB. It's only required if you do like honors IB, which is some IB, but not full IB. But there's some mix up with the thing. So she might try to get into it second semester, but she doesn't have that. But it's civics. It's good. Like, people need to learn civics because, let me tell you, go into the comment section on any news article on social media and you will understand why people need to learn civics. Anyway, that was their school thing. So this is their second full day, which they have AB schedule. So their classes, they do 4 classes a day, but they're longer. So yesterday was A day, today's B day. So this is their second half of their first real day of school. So we'll see how it goes. As for me and my reading, I finished 3 books this week, but I'm only going to talk about 2 because the third one, which I finished last night, is Challenger, and that was for the BookTube prize. So you'll have to tune in early October to know what I thought of that. I've already filmed my little thing. My plan, by the way, for the BookTube prize recap this time around is I've done little, and I've kept them to like 2-ish minutes of recaps of the books as I read them, and then I'll organize them. So hopefully that video will be less than 15 minutes when you get the whole thing. But anyway, I've already done that, so I'm not going to talk anymore about Challenger. You'll have to tune in later. But I do have a lot to say about the 2 books I did finish. The first one I finished was the book I've been waiting for. Cleared my schedule off. It was released on Tuesday, the 2nd. However, it showed up on my Kobo at like 5 o'clock on the 1st, and I was really mad because I had to make dinner before I could start it. But I did start it, and I finished it within 24 hours, so I count that my read a book in a day thing, and that is Apostles' Cove by William Kent Krueger. This is either number 20 or number 21 in the Cork O'Connor series. The reason I say that is because Goodreads says it's number 20 and Storygraph says it's number 21. The sticking point is the book Lightning Strike, which I will talk about in a little bit because I have things to say. Of course I have things to say about William Kent Krueger. So buckle up, Buttercup, because here we go. So this is a really interesting book for a couple reasons. One reason is because it's really 2 books in one. We meet Cork at the beginning. He's getting ready for his 60th birthday, and he's doing stuff in Sam's place, which is a little burger place that also doubles as his private investigator office. And his son Stephen calls him, and Stephen is in law school, he's in law school, and he works for the Innocence Project, or an organization like the Innocence Project. And he calls his dad and he says, "Guess what, Dad? Remember this case from 25 years ago that you worked on when Cork was sheriff of that he's in Aurora, Minnesota, which is in the Northwoods. Well, I think you put away the wrong person." So then we go back 25 years in the past. And this is before the events of Iron Lake, which is the first book of the Cork O'Connor series. And I will say right now, this is not a prequel book. So don't think of this as a prequel. You do need to have read the whole series because the second half, which is present day, and I'll talk about that, talks about a lot of the other books. So anyway, it goes back to this. And this is really interesting for a couple reasons. First of all, 2 characters who are in it. One is Sam Wintermoon. So Sam Wintermoon was an Indigenous man who had been very good friends with Cork O'Connor's father. However, as a character, he's only in one other book, which is Lightning Strike, which is the prequel, because he's already passed away by the beginning of Iron Lake. But he was a very important figure in Cork's life. Sam's place, the burger place, Cork got from him. So he's always sort of like there, but not in the books. But here he actually is a character. So that was really fun to see. The second one is the character of Jo, who is Cork's wife. And it's interesting because I've never liked this character because in Iron Lake, the first book, she's terrible. And I've not ever forgiven her I've never gotten over how terrible she is in that first book. And this book takes place before Iron Lake when they're happy. So timing wise, their daughters, Jenny and Annie, are still young, and Jo is pregnant with Stephen at the time. So it's like 3 years before, because I think Stephen's like 3 years old in Iron Lake or something like that. So it's at a happier time in their lives. So it was interesting to kind of see that dynamic, because it's not a dynamic that I see a lot of, even in different books where their relationship is in a better place. In the Cork O'Connor series, I still didn't forgive her, so I didn't care. But now the reasons I don't like her haven't happened yet, so I have to, you know what I mean. The other interesting thing about this is we get to know exactly when the Cork O'Connor series takes place, because when you go back 25 years, William Kent Krueger includes some context clues that are incredibly clear about where we are in time. So this is the 25 years before. None of these are spoilers because they're just details. One is this book takes place in both the 25 years before and the present day, takes place right before Halloween, which is great. One of the things I love about the series is how well William Kent Krueger uses the different seasons of this area, because in the Northwoods of Minnesota, the seasons are very distinct. to really set you in time. So we're really fall season, and I love fall. So I love it. We're in Halloween, right before Halloween. And he talks about the 25 years ago thing, all the yard signs. Some are for Dukakis and some are for Bush. And that was the election of 1988. And then in another part, he talks about this song that stuck in his head that was released that summer, which was Don't Worry, Be Happy, which was released in 1988. So we know that 25 years ago was 1988. That means present day is 2013, and it is not 2025. And I thought that was really interesting. For one thing, I would like to go back to 2013 because that was a few years before everything hit the fan. So there's that. But also I was thinking about this because I had always kind of in my mind just accepted that it takes place in present day. The series takes place in present day, and now it clearly doesn't. But if I thought about it, as I said, each of these books is really tied to a season in this part of the country. There's one book where they go to Arizona, which is also really cool because they go to Arizona, the part of Arizona that I always go to, and he still does it really well. But the seasons play a really important part in these books. And there's 21 books. So roughly one every year. 4 times he took a year off to write a standalone, but still. So I think if you go back to Iron Lake, and I think that came out in 98, something like that. You would think you would be in 2025, but you aren't. But if you think about it, like there'll be a book that's set in, say, fall, and the next book is not set the next fall. It might be set the next spring, which is less than a year. And I have a feeling that William Ken Krueger knows what the hell he's doing and has actually timed this out. And that's how he got to 2013 with that. So the other thing I suspect about this, and this is just vibes from this book, is I have a feeling that because this deals with a case that happened long before, I have a feeling that was actually something that William Ken Krueger tried to make into a book earlier in the series and just wasn't able to fill it out at that time. But now that he's able to go back and treat it as something that happened in the past that we're revisiting, it works as a book. That's a suspicion on my part. Anyway, we go back and we're talk about a murder. Now, this first part of the book feels very much, and this is why I have that suspicion, feels very much like an early Cork O'Connor book. It is more actiony. It's faster paced. So there's that. And I've already forgotten some of the characters' names. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to be random. We meet, there's a woman, her name's Chastity. I do, because some of these names are crazy. I do remember the crazy names. And they're called over because someone calls and says, "Oh, come here, my daughter's been attacked." And they go to this woman's house. Her name's Chastity. Chastity is naked, lying in a pool of blood, and her mother, Aphrodite, is holding a knife. This is the 25 years ago thing. So the story kind of goes, Aphrodite is this sort of, she's adopted that name. No one named their child Aphrodite, but Aphrodite did name her child Chastity. That's a whole thing. Aphrodite is this, she came there as a hippie and married this rich guy who died, and now she owns this place called Shangri-La, which is basically a sex nest where people go and den of iniquity kind of thing, and she sleeps with everybody and everyone and every sort of thing. And Aphrodite is convinced that Chastity's husband, cannot remember this guy's name. Anyway, I have this as an ebook. Otherwise, I would just look it up. Anyway, that did it. And he is the person who is ultimately, that's the person they're doing the Innocence Project for. So that's what's going on there. Then we go 25 years in the future, which is 2013. And at this point, I will say I do appreciate this book not being an emotional gut punch book, because the last Cork O'Connor book was. This one is definitely a little bit lighter emotionally in some ways. But we're near 60-year-old Cork, and he's still living in his house on whatever name, I can't remember the name of it, this big house he lives in that I can see in my mind perfectly, this house. But he lives there with his oldest daughter, Jenny, and Jenny's husband, and Jenny's son, who's adopted. That was a whole book. His name is Wabu. He's a delightfully creepy child. And Cork agrees to take another look at this case. And Jenny has become a crime writer. She's always looking for more material. So she's decided she's going to help her dad with this. I was a little surprised that Jenny featured so prominently in this book and not Stephen, just from the description. I thought it would be more Stephen than Jenny, but it's fine. And they kind of go through and they actually go through and redig up this case and work it out. I'm not going to go into it any further than that because you should read the book because it was a lot of fun. It was really the book I needed after, especially the end of August, where I was pushing to get through 2 big books. And as much as I enjoyed those books, they were both great books. I mean, Lonesome Dove is currently my number 2 book of the year. I love that book. But they were emotional gut. That one at least was an emotional gut punch. And they were just big books. And there was like that extra stress at the end of the month that I had created for myself, blaming no one but myself. So it was nice to just sink into this world that I know so well and that I can just trust it's going to work. And yes, so definitely it is a worthy addition to the Cork O'Connor series. I really enjoyed it. Don't start with it. Don't. But I'm going to get to that too in just a second. One thing I do want to say before I get to that, the 2 like mystery series that I'm really invested in are Cork O'Connor and Three Pines. And there's the next Three Pines book is coming out next month. And there is a lot of speculation that this may be the last Three Pines book because Louise Penny hasn't said that, but she also isn't saying that she's working on the next Three Pines book, and she usually does say that. It also will be book 20, which is a good place to stop, I guess. And just the way the books are, it's just a feeling that a lot of people have. And my first reaction was like, no, don't take Gamache away from me. But honestly, it'd be okay if that one ended at this point. I think it would end fine. It would be fine. Cork O'Connor's not going anywhere. Cork O'Connor might take a year off, so we get another standalone at some point, but he's not going anywhere. So, and I love that. I love that. Okay, my last thing I'm going to say about this is someone, and I forgot to look it up. Was it Jill? Is that right? Or was it Julie? Or who was this? Someone said, I want to try William Kent Krueger. Where should I start? Now, I have talked a lot about how to read, like if you start with the standalones, how to get into Cork O'Connor, which is because they're very different. Cork O'Connor, and I sat in on an author interview with William Kent Krueger one time, and he said like Cork O'Connor is his job, but his standalones are his career sort of thing. His standalones are very literary, and Cork O'Connor is a thrillery mystery series. And it does get a little more literary as you go on because I think William Kent Krueger grew as an author. But especially the early books, it sometimes is a real jolt to people who come from the standalones and go to Cork O'Connor. So I always say, if you're going to do that, start with Lightning Strike, which is either book 18, according to Storygraph, or book 0.5, according to Goodreads, which is why the numbering is off. It's a prequel. You can read it at any time. But if you're saying, I want to read Cork O'Connor, I don't care where I start, which is how I interpreted the question to me. You can go find the comment, but this is what I said. If that is the case, my suggestion is to start with Iron Lake, which is Cork O'Connor number 1, and read at least 3 of the first 3 Cork O'Connor books. And at that point, or any time after that point, if you want to go over to the standalones, go ahead and do it. Just read Lightning Strike first. Lightning Strike can be read at any time. I read it in order just because that's the way it came out. But you can read it before Iron Lake. You can read it in between any of the books. It's fine. And then as for the standalones, whatever you like, they were all 5-star for me. So there you go. Any of them. But yeah, that's what I would say. I would say start with Cork O'Connor, get a couple under your belt, read Lightning Strike before you go on to the standalones. And at that point, you can kind of go between the two. There's one other book called The Devil's Bed that he wrote, and it feels like he was trying to start another series. The only 2 reasons I would give to read this book, it's not that it's a bad book, it's just not as good as Cork O'Connor. It's a lot darker. It doesn't have the things that make William Kent Krueger's books stand out to me. So to me, it's not a necessary book. But if you want to be a completist, go read it. Or in like Cork O'Connor book, like, I don't know, like 15 or 16, something like that. The character, who's the main character of The Devil's Bed, shows up in that book, and he does a little thing like he talks about it in the author's note or something. And if you want to read more from there, then go ahead and read it. But I don't consider that a must read. But anyway, that's my William Kent Krueger gushing. My one complaint about that book, I will give you my one little complaint, which is so small that I'm not even counting it, is Aphrodite and Shangri-La are such big Aphrodite is such a big character, and big as in overpowering and intentionally overpowering. I'm not saying that it's a critique on how she's written. I'm just saying as a character, she's an overpowering kind of person. And Shangri-La is so atypical of Aurora, Minnesota, that it's really weird that you don't hear about him until now. But then again, you have the 25 years ago thing going. But anyway, that's my take on it. That also kind of leads me why I think that might have been the start of another book that didn't work out, and you know what I'm saying. Anyway, the other book I finished is for my library book club, and it is Hard by a Great Forest by that guy. Not even trying. This book is an emotional gut punch. I will start that. I'm still a little wavering on what my rating on this one is, but this story is about Sabo. So Sabo is a young man. He's currently living in London. He came to London from the country of Georgia. I have to clarify that. The country of Georgia, when he was a young boy during the war. There was a war. I kind of remember there being a war. I think there's been more wars than that. It's a former Soviet republic. Jim, from Jim's books, reading, and stuff, lives in Georgia. And I have questions for you at the end, Jim. His father, Irakli, had gotten Sabo and his brother Sandro out of the country to London during the war with the idea that his mother, Ekla, is that the name? Ekla? They always have these different names. Ekla, and he was going to follow them. But she never made it. And then in the very recent past to this book, Sabo's father, Irakli, goes back to Georgia to try and find her. Well, trying to find out what happened to her. They know that she has died, but try to find out what happens to her. And then he goes missing. So then Sandro, Sabo's older brother, goes to Georgia to try to find their father. And he goes missing. So this book is Sabo, who goes to Georgia to find his brother and his father, and what happens. This book is very heavily influenced, or you kind of get the vibes of Hansel and Gretel, but also the Baba Yaga stories, which I don't know very well, honestly. But I do know Hansel and Gretel. There are a lot of references to it. So this is it's really good at showing, the effects of war, and in this situation, and trying to recover for that, and how it leaves a country and how it leaves a family. It was, as I said, an emotional gut punch. I do think there are areas of improvement. It is a debut novel. I felt like I needed more character development for Irakli and Sandro so that I better understood Sabo's quest, if that makes any sense. That's probably my biggest complaint about this book. There is a weird thing, which is true. I looked this up. It is true. This did actually happen. Before Sabo gets there to Tbilisi, there was a flood that flooded the zoo, and all the animals got free. And so they're kind of running around town. That actually happened in 2015. So this book takes place in 2015, 2 years after Apostles' Cove. I did think Sandro was done really well. There's some other, I'm not going to go into the other characters, but there are some other characters around him, some alive, some not, that are done well. But I just think that the weak spots were Irakli and Sandro, and I just felt like I needed more from them so that I understood Sabo better. I really what should I give this rating? And if I were giving half stars, it would be 3.5. I ended up giving it 4-star, but my book discussion on it is tomorrow. And so I reserve the right to change that to see because those book discussions sort of clarify my thoughts. And also, one thing that I like to do when I read books that are set in places that I have never been to the Republic of Georgia. I always, after I'm done, I go to Google and I look up pictures of that place to see how close it was in my mind. And Tbilisi, I was pretty good on. But a lot of this book takes place in another part of Georgia, which you'll have to read to find out what that was, which has a very different feel. And so I looked that up, and at least when I did my one quick Google search, only one picture came up out of And it was just as bleak. But anyway, I believe Jim, at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff, said that he had read this book. And what I would like to know from you, Jim, is how accurate do you feel that it captured Georgia? Do you feel like this was a good depiction of life in Georgia? This book took place in 2015. I don't know if you were living in Georgia in 2015 or not. But even now, like, did you feel that it accurately captured sort of the way Georgia looks, or sort of the national personality of Georgia? I'm curious, because I don't know anybody from Georgia other than Jim who's not actually from Georgia. He lives there, but he's English. So I'd like to know that. So there you go. There's Hard by a Great Forest. As for what I'm reading now, it'll be down below. I did kick off my shorty September with Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, because I've never read it. I read the first section so far, but I do like John Steinbeck. I'm fitting in my first of 2 Agatha Christie's for this month before I start a buddy read with Michelle next week. So that's what's going on, but it's all down below. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. If you would like to leave an emoji, some people like to let me know that you stayed for the whole thing. You can leave me an emoji of a zoo animal because of the zoo animals that are roaming free. That would be fun. Anyway, like, subscribe, join my Discord. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.